Hi everybody, ReverendDrRed here. As I stated in the last video, I'm going to do an update video on The Dark Knight Rises Massacre and what my personal opinion is about the entire thing when more evidence turns up. Well, more evidence has arose, so as promised, I'm going to do the update video. This is right now. Now, there's quite a few things going on here between evidence rising and a lack of evidence. What I'm going to say is probably going to seem extremely controversial and conspiratorial to people, so if you don't want to hear what I got to say, then stop watching the video now. If you have an open mind or are willing to listen with an open mind, then please, by all means, continue to listen. Now, as you know, plenty of witnesses stated there were two shooters. One shooter rolled a gas canister across the aisle to where it hit the foot of the other shooter, and threw a gas canister up the aisle. It's also been said that aside from the gear being found in Holmes' car with Holmes, that the actual weapons that is being counted as evidence were scattered all across the parking lot. But there's no mention of the fact that there were two sets of weapons. They're only mentioning one of each weapon that was found, and one set of body armor and one gas mask. Now, even if you want to buy the story of just one, you still have to question, well, was Holmes wearing it or not? I mean, they suggest that he was wearing the camouflage, all the gear, and he was holding the weapons in his hands when they found them. Now, if that's so, then looking at the photos at the crime scene, you have an AR-15 at the exit door where the shooter exited the building. You have some of the camouflage gear on the corner there in between the door and the vehicle. And at the other end of the building, you have some more evidence was found, and directly underneath the camera that's facing down that way is another gas mask, suggesting that the shooter went over that way with the gas mask on to keep his face hidden, and when he got out of the view of the camera, then took it off. Now, if Holmes was the only shooter, why would he waste his time spreading the evidence all across the parking lot and then get back in his car and just wait for the cops, where the cops suggest that he was completely incoherent and incapacitated? Had no clue what was going on, can barely stand or anything. Why would he do that? Then you have the fact that just looking at his photograph, the mugshot, as opposed to when he was in court, implies that his mugshot was taken the same day he went into court. Why not take it the day they arrested him? Because he was incapacitated, he was incoherent. He was too drugged up. He could barely stand. And then there's the fact that there's a slight media blackout on this whole thing. Some people will say, well, it's because of the gag order, the judge put on the case. Fine, great, you can believe that. But even Googling or doing any kind of internet search for information on this, even to get independent journalists and bloggers' websites with whatever information they may have, you got to phrase your search just the right way. Otherwise, what you're going to come up with is the same articles over and over and over again that immediately follow the shooting. So there seems to be something here that they are deliberately trying to cover up. The question is what and why. Now, there's also this network that the military has in place called GWEN, or Ground Wave Emergency Network, where in the event that we're under an EMP attack and our power grid goes out, the president or whoever manages to survive can still manage to get messages out across to the military and, plan attacks and blah, 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 blah. Now, back in 1994, Congress decommissioned the program and told the military that they're not allowed to use GWEN because of the possibility of it being used for mind control. And they were fearful of the possibility of it being used as mind control of the American populace. Well, at the exact time the shooting began, it was picked up that a frequency was emitted from a GWEN tower just 111 miles from the theater in Aurora, Colorado. And each GWEN tower is able to shoot a frequency in a 360-degree direction as far out as 300 miles. Obviously, the further the distance, the weaker the signal gets, but it can reach us up to 300 miles away. I find it a little interesting how this GWEN tower emitted a frequency out just 111 miles away from the theater where this shooting took place at the same exact time the shooting started. Do you see a problem with that? I mean, why else can this program that's not supposed to be being used anymore right now, emitting a signal out in the middle of the night? Can anybody answer that question? And allegedly, those towers are still used for military missions. Obviously, illegally, considering Congress won't allow it. But it's happening. Then there's the fact that Robert Holmes, Robert Holmes Sr., the grandfather of James Holmes, was lieutenant colonel in the Army and worked. He was fluently in Turkish, and he worked at the same base where one of the 9/11 hijackers were trained. And he also more than likely worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency, or Central Intelligence Agency, as back in those days, and most people who spoke Turkish fluently either worked to some degree with the Defense Intelligence Agency or the Central Intelligence Agency. There's our first connection to all this misbehavior, so to speak. Then we have Robert Holmes Jr., James Holmes' father. Robert Holmes has a PhD in statistics, and he's the lead scientist for FICO. I'm sure everybody knows who FICO is. Well, he developed a mathematical algorithm that can trace the banking systems, or where money is going, where it's coming from, who it's going to, and all of that, amongst other programs. Well, it's one program that he created. He allegedly managed to track back the trillions of dollars that just vanished to the exact bank accounts where the money wound up. Now, if that's true, that means he can name names. He can name the elites behind this entire mess. He can name the elite, those in power. those that have been destroying our lives and taking our money and manipulating every piece of society. You'd be able to name names. You know, those people that don't want to be named, Those people that want to continue to live behind the curtain, so to speak. And he allegedly was supposed to sit before a Senate hearing in just a few weeks about this elaborate scandal, where he was going to release these names. Now, some people would say that, well, if they wanted to just get to Robert Holmes, why not just kill him? Well, don't you think a man of that kind of intelligence as Robert Holmes and the information he now had in the palm of his hand, he'd have dispersed out to numerous other individuals, and that if he doesn't check in every X amount of time, to then after that information can just spread everywhere, and or if anything happens to him, to release that information everywhere, you don't think he would have had enough intelligence to set up a network like that? Or considering how he used the software, considering he made numerous programs, now you know he doesn't have it where every X amount of time he has to punch in the password to this particular program. And if he misses doing that, this program will automatically flood everybody's emails with his information. You don't know that. And the elite, I'm sure, know he's capable of that. So rather than kill him and risk the information still getting out, it'd be easier to threaten him. Show him more or less what they're capable of. So, to do so, they send a man or two to his son's apartment or his son's school, befriend James, start drugging James, and implementing these different thoughts into his mind, fully equipped with a trigger word or a trigger vision and everything. So now when he hears that word or sees that image, the program kicks in. And at the end of the mission, or at whatever designated time they set for it, it ends. And in most mind control cases, you're not going to remember anything that happened. Particularly if you use a particular drug that has been used in MK Ultra and numerous other areas. I believe the drug is pronounced scopolamine. They claim this drug is being used as an antidepressant and an antipsychotic, but in small, minute doses. In larger doses, it's said to create schizophrenia, paranoia, hallucinations, and even amnesia, where you have no recollection of what happened. And under the influence of scopolamine, it is extremely easy for somebody to take control of your mind. And by the time the scopolamine wears off, you have no clue what just happened at all. And it's been said that they're having crime scenes or criminals that use scopolamine to drug their victims, and their victims would go into the bank and withdraw their money for the robber, or help the robber out to his vehicle with their own stuff in the house. And when they woke up, they're missing their property, they're missing all their money, and they have no recollection as to what happened to it. They don't remember because they're under the influence of scopolamine. And it's being suggested that James Holmes was also under the influence of scopolamine. I'm also going to suggest that it is impossible for somebody of James Holmes' capacity and James Holmes' life patterns to suddenly just wake up one day and decide that we're going to go on this great big killing spree and be able to use the weapons that he had the way he did, causing as much damage as he had. It is also impossible for somebody like that to create an explosive device in his apartment, or an explosive maze, I should say, in his apartment, wired so sophisticated and put together so sophisticated that the police chief says he hasn't seen anything like it. Now, going by a little bit of information that's out about the explosive devices in James Holmes' apartment, it's been said that the only people that are capable to build such a sophisticated device is military personnel and the CIA, which means that he had to have had help building this explosive device in his apartment. Considering there's no way he'd know how to use a firearm properly to cause the amount of damage he caused without some kind of training first, it only further states that somebody either trained him or somebody else did the shooting for him or with him. Therefore, successfully making James Holmes a patsy, and at the same time sending a message to Robert Holmes, pretty much stating more or less, look, we just destroyed your son's life. You give up our names, you're done. And at the same time, obviously, there's this great big call for gun control because of this massacre. So it could have also been used as a false flag attack to push the passage of the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty, which thankfully got delayed by the American government. Hasn't been signed yet. But do you see what I'm getting at here? You have an individual who is in a doctoral program for neuroscience, granted they're using that against them, but he's in a doctoral program for neuroscience, right? Led a relatively quiet life, and allegedly had no friends. Spent a lot of time playing online role-play games. But we're supposed to believe he didn't have a Twitter or a Facebook account, even though he was online all the time. That doesn't make any sense right off the bat. Then there's the fact that they claim he only dyed his hair that color for whatever reason for the shooting. But there's pictures circulating around at least a good month before with him having that hair color. Granted, the pictures could be photoshopped, but either way, it's still suggesting that he had that hair color for about a month's time before the shooting. So for whatever reason, he must have been obsessed with that color. And with the media blackout, and with nobody really answering these questions, only quotes independent journalists and internet bloggers and anybody who wants the truth to really look at all of the evidence and lack of evidence and try to come to a conclusion themselves as to how, why, and answer all the unanswered questions. Fact of the matter is, there's no way he could have pulled that off himself. And even if he did, why? Now you just shot this building up. You waste your apartment with explosives, with all intents and purposes of harming anybody who opens up that door. Why would you scatter your gear all over the parking lot and then get in your car and lock yourself in the car and just sit there? And then when the police arrive, not only are they going to suggest you're still wearing your gear and holding all your weapons, but then you're also going to tell them that your apartment is rigged. Why would you do that? Anybody in their right mind that's going to go on any kind of killing spree, they're either going to kill themselves when they're done, or they're going to get rid of the evidence, hop back in their vehicle, or whatever they have planned to get out of there, and get out of there. They're not going to take their time to spread evidence all over the place and then just sit there. What's the point in that? And then you're going to warn the police about your explosives that were waiting more than likely for them. Now, let's just consider this for a second. Let's say, just for a second now, that the elite know that Robert Holmes is going to release their names. They're going to be in big trouble. Not only is that going to push the entire global community to want to put these men behind bars, but it's also going to cause a tidal wave of chaos throughout the world banking system and the world economy. And actually, they don't want their lives destroyed. And they want to keep all their power and control. They don't want to be behind bars. They don't want to see their empire crumble. So, they turn this into a black op. Send a message to Robert. They befriend James, drug him with the scopolamine, program his mind for this shooting. They get there. The place gets shot up. The guy that was drugging Holmes and kind of influencing how this whole massacre went, then starts shedding himself of all the gear, drops the weapons, and leaves the gas mask on to hide his face until he goes down, gets down underneath the camera, so not out of the camera's sight. Takes the gas mask off, and then either hops in a vehicle waiting for him, or just walks towards the front of the theater and joins the crowd. Blends in with the rest of them. Cops arrive, they don't know no better. And James Holmes is determined to be the single shooter of this massacre. Now they're going to try to twist and turn all of the evidence and use his own education against him to try to lead the public to believe that he was able to pull such a thing off all by himself in less than 2 to 3 months. And be trained enough to fire a firearm properly can cause that much damage, and be trained enough by somebody, somewhere, not only to build these explosive devices, but set them up in such a manner that local police say they have never seen anything like it. And that the particular setup has only been seen by military personnel and CIA agents. Now, and then cops find James Holmes sitting in the car. He tries warning them that there's explosives in the apartment to save their lives, because now the drugs are starting to wear off. Or maybe he wasn't drugged enough or properly, and he had some kind of recollection of what might have been going on. And he remembers seeing explosives in his apartment. So now he's going to warn the police about it. And a lot of people suggest that because of his education, that he's faking all this. He's just pretending to have amnesia and all this other stuff. But as of right now, I don't believe it. I mean, I will say that anything is possible. It is possible that he is faking it. But at the same token, nothing is impossible. If you want to come to the truth, you have to look at all angles. Everything that you test, every theory you test out, as they, drop off, you'll finally get to the truth. And in a lot of cases, the improbable is usually the truth. So there's a good chance that he's faking it. He did it all himself, and he just knew how to shoot that perfect. And there's pieces of his child life, or whatever, using weapons that nobody was told about. But there's also a good chance that he had help, and that he was drugged, and used as a patsy. I'm going to say, whether he's a patsy or not, he definitely had help. There was at least a second individual involved in this, if not a third. There's no way that he was able to pull this off by himself. No way. So if he's not a patsy, and he wasn't targeted to send a message to his father, then he's protecting the other individual or individuals that were involved. And the way everything went down, he was not the only one behind this. Or he was drugged, more than likely with scopolamine or some other kind of mind-altering drug, and was being used under mind control as a patsy, and send a message to his father by the elite to keep the names hush-hush, connecting back to the library scandal. Now, I told you I was going to give you an updated information, my personal opinion. Well, there it is. You can think I'm completely crazy, You might want to believe what the mainstream is telling you, but I don't. There's too many unanswered questions. Not investigate this yourself. And then you got to question why the gag order. Granted, the judge claims the gag order is in place to protect James Holmes' life and privacy. I don't believe that for a second. He's the alleged suspect of a mass murder. He's the alleged suspect that shot and killed 12 people and injured 58 more. And you're going to worry about his safety when he's behind bars right now throughout the trial. And I believe that they're holding him in solitary. By himself. No other prisoners or anything around him. Go by himself. But you're going to worry about his privacy and his safety when he's the alleged suspect of this massacre? I don't buy that. There's just too much that the mainstream isn't telling us, and there's far too much information that's being hidden about all this. I personally believe there was other people involved, and I believe that, considering the timing, it is far too coincidental that this massacre happened just a week before the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty was supposed to be signed, and that happened just weeks before Robert Holmes was supposed to stand before the Senate and discuss the LIBOR fraud, where he was allegedly going to release the names of the elite responsible for the disappearance of these trillions of dollars that just vanished. Way too coincidental. And like I said, this kid never met with explosives or any kind of weapons before in his life. He seemed to be hardcore into his neuroscience studies and his online activity. And we're supposed to believe that without any help from anybody, he managed to pull this off by himself. I don't believe it. There's at least one additional suspect out there. And all this media blackout about this case is doing is protecting that other individual or individuals that had some play in this massacre with James Holmes. Well, like it or not, that's where the evidence is pointing. If it's true, and I do mean if it's true, that right there explains the how and the why. Of course, it still leaves open the question of who was behind it. And unless Robert Holmes releases the names, we're not going to know. But if it's all true, there's your how and your why. If it's not, time will tell. If it is, time will tell. But as of right now, that's where all the evidence is leading to. And that James Holmes, Patsy or not, had help from this massacre. And there's a possibility that he is a Patsy. That's where the evidence is leading. Whether it's another week down the road, month down the road, year down the road, that any more evidence comes out on this particular case, I will have a follow-up to this update. But until more evidence arises, some serious concrete evidence that will sway my opinion one way or the other, or will actually make a difference in, what's behind this case, and the reasoning why this massacre went down the way it went down, I will have a follow-up on this update. Until then, I'm going to go back to my usual trend of videos, and the Dark Knight Rises Massacre series, for now, is done. You got my update with the new evidence that I came across in the past week, and my opinion. So until more evidence rises and some hardcore concrete facts emerge, and when that happens, I'll be back on for follow-up, whenever that may be. If some concrete factual evidence comes about tomorrow, I'll have another video up tomorrow. If it doesn't come up for another, year, 2 years, 3 years from now, then that's when I have my follow-up. I'm going to be following this as best I can, and try to find some hardcore, concrete, factual evidence about who is really responsible for this, how many accomplices did James Holmes have, is he protecting them, or is he a Patsy? Right now, you have my opinion. And like I said, if it's true, we have the how and the why. And if it's true, and this is the how and the why, then in the follow-up, I will hopefully have the who. We just gotta wait and see what happens and how the rest of this plays out. If anybody has any confirmation that I didn't get to about this case, can you let them send it to me? Please do so via any of the email addresses at ReverendDrRed.com or spiritualmessiahministries.org. And I'll review whatever evidence it is that you submit. That being said, thank you for listening. If need be for a follow-up, I'll do a follow-up. If not, starting with my next video, I'm going to go back to my usual trend of videos. Thank you for listening. God bless. Let me add one more thing. I'm not suggesting that what James Holmes did is right. Whether he was a Patsy or not, it still isn't right. All I'm trying to get at is maybe, he's not the only one. And maybe even though he's obviously responsible for some degree of this massacre, there is a good possibility he was a victim of this as well. I'm trying to keep my mind open, and I'm trying to look at all possibilities. And when you have so many coincidences and circumstantial events taking place, you got to be able to look at the entire picture and try to put the puzzle pieces together. And like I said, time will tell. As I said in my first video, my prayers go out to all the victims and their families. But at the same time, we need to be asking these questions. We need to be putting the puzzle together. And if there were other shooters involved, How come that fact is not being released? And how come it went rather quickly from they were looking for a second suspect to all of a sudden there's no second suspect? Now you really need to pay attention to these mess-ups in the mainstream news media's story and how people are handling this. There's something not right about all this. So I'm not trying to take blame away from where it belongs. All I'm simply trying to get at is he definitely had help. There's at least one other that the blame falls on. And there's a good chance that he was drugged and used as a patsy. Alright. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.